When I started this manga, I kept in mind every review that said, hey, I sobbed when I read the final volume. Y'all, they were not playing. They were not joking because, y'all, I sobbed my eyes out when I read that final volume. Hello friends, happy Friday. So very excited that you're here. We are doing another manga review on a series from the Dessert Magazine. Last week we did I'll Never Fall in Love with Amino, a 3-volume romantic comedy that was so much fun. On the flip side, I think I asked in a Discord server, like, hey, what manga should I read from the Dessert Magazine? And I really wanted to do physical. We've talked a lot here recently in one of the recent Top 5 Wednesday videos that I've done. Yeah, it was the underrated digital manga. There's so much. There's so many great titles. I don't think I did a graphic of highlighting a bunch of them. I thought about it, but there was just so many of them, I was afraid I would miss one. So when a friend of mine gave me a recommendation for this manga, I'm pretty confident she has suggested it to me before. I know other people have, and I actually read volume 1 2 years ago, and I could not get into it. I'm going to explain why, but this time around, I'm so glad I gave it a second chance, and that is Wake Up Sleeping Beauty. It is a 6-volume series. This, man, I am really hoping that I will do this series justice because it was very emotional. I was going back through my Goodreads reviews because I write reviews for every book I read. If I don't write a review, then you know I had thoughts on it and I don't want to share it, which is never, I feel like for me, it's not a good thing. But starting with volume 3, that is when the emotions were hitting. I mean, it was already emotional, but y'all, I cried pretty much every single volume, cried reading this one, and then I straight out sobbed reading volume 6. But first, before we go into me rambling about all of the things, I will do my best to keep it spoiler free. So I'm not really sure how much I'm going to go into some of the characters because I want to keep that spoiler free, but I'm going to do my very best to at least talk about my love for this series. So let's go ahead and talk about what the series is about. It is about our main male lead. Yes, this series is told from the male lead's perspective. His name is Tetsu. He is a sweet little precious being. He isn't gonna have to be in my best favorite boys Hall of Fame that I have because yes, he was just so wonderful. But he is, I believe he's 18. He's in his final year of high school and he is doing different jobs, trying to pick up some money and help his family. He gets a job as a housekeeper for this very wealthy family. He is warned to never go back or go to the back of, how do I say this? They have like the main house and then there's sort of like an outhouse, not like a bathroom, but an outhouse that's another small house that's farther back. And they're warned not to go over there. There's rumors that it's haunted and everything. Well, he is cleaning the, I believe, backyard and he decides to sit on a bench. He takes a nap. When he wakes up, he sees our main female lead, Shizu. He thinks she's very beautiful, but he also is like, oh my goodness, I shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be talking to her. And all these things. So he sort of runs off, but then he goes back because he drops his bank book. And when he sees Shizu again, she's like, who are you? And he's like, who am I? Because I'm pretty sure they had a conversation the day before, but he's just trying to find his bank book. And this leads to him getting to know the female lead and see that she is hurting, that she is very lonely, and there's so much more to her than just keeping her trapped in this house where she interacts with literally nobody, not even her parents. This was an incredibly emotional, moving story. It is a romance, if I didn't say that it was a very sweet romance at that. Going back to what I said before of when I read this 2 years ago, and shout to the very sweet friend, I can't even remember if I bought the copies off of her, but she sent me, I know she sent me at least, this series physically for me to own. She was letting it go for some reason, not because she disliked it. I think she was just sort of downsizing at the time. I remember trying volume 1 and I wouldn't say I disliked it, but I didn't really like it either. And at the time, I really couldn't figure out why I was not into it. Like, so many people had said, it's so great, it's so great. And that's part of why I didn't tell a single soul that I read it and I didn't like it, or at least didn't absolutely love it. I ended up giving it to, because at that time my library was accepting donations, and so I just donated it to them so they could use it, like put it either in the system or use it for the library sale. When I came back to this volume and I was rereading, I realized that I related so much to Tetsu in the sense I am not one that is for supernatural paranormal things. I am very hesitant to pick up these kind of stories where I know there's a supernatural element because I get scared pretty easily. It's why, unfortunately, I dropped Toilet Bound Hanako-kun. I loved what I read of that, but I didn't like being spooked at nighttime. And I said, well, I just have to stop here, despite that I really like the characters. Now, I have further read other series. I don't think I have it down here because I rearranged my manga yet. But like Hakurio, that was a series you guys voted for, and I absolutely loved it. Last year, I read Last Quarter and deeply enjoyed that as well. So much so that I really have debated, even now, still getting that series for my personal collection just because of how touching it was. And that leads me all to say that when I don't know what was different about those series, maybe because similar to Wake Up Sleeping Beauty, I felt I was, I don't want to say forced, but I had committed to reading this series for whatever reason. Usually because like it won a poll or you guys voted for it or somebody suggested it and I had no other ideas. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And I'm very, very thankful that I had that in my mind that I would commit to reading this series in this fullness, because the reason I didn't connect, sorry, that was really long-winded, but the reason I didn't connect with it is because I did not like the supernatural elements in the beginning. I was okay at the very beginning when we're seeing obviously something is going on with Shizu, but it was near the end when we see a possession that happens and I said, I am freaked out right now. I said, no. I said, I want to stop here. And I said, no, we're going to keep going. Because the thing is, when it comes to these supernatural kind of stories, I needed to have a purpose. And when I read volume 1, I didn't know what the purpose was. I thought they were just trying to scare Tetsu. Therefore, I too was scared alongside him. And I don't like that. I don't want the purpose just to be a fear factor to scare the reader. No, no, no. I don't want that. I need meaning. And that is when volume 2, I felt I started having a deeper connection with this series. I'm like, oh, there's a lot more to this fear that is happening, this supernatural element that has a genuine purpose. It was not just to make Tetsu feel afraid in the first volume, though that does play an overlying role in his character growth through the whole series, but I found that it had a purpose, and that was exactly what I needed. And I honestly don't know if somebody would have told me like, yes, Laura, it has a purpose, that I would have changed my mind back then. I am much more open now, and I've shared that before, of trying things again. If I didn't connect the first time, I am willing to give it another chance, because that's just sometimes how it goes, where timing isn't that right the first time, so you just need a second chance. And I really started seeing, man, that Shizu, and I guess with that at first, I was only here for Tetsu, and I feel bad for saying that. I didn't dislike Shizu, but because it had that supernatural vibe again that I really just didn't know what to think, I started becoming invested in her story and seeing her as a person. And I will say that it's going into one thing I deeply appreciate about Sensei's work is that all of her characters feel like really real people. Insanely so sometimes. I'm like, you know, this is fiction, but the way these characters act, the things they do, the thoughts they think, I'm like, gee, you sound like a real person. And it can be hard to remind myself that these aren't real people. And I do think that might have played a role near the end of why I cried so hard, because some of these spirits that we meet, they felt real. And I can't really explain further on that, at least where I can think of how to keep it spoiler free, but I truly was amazed. And I don't know if it's because this is the same creator as A Condition Called Love. I do have a review on this series, or a review on that series, excuse me, and I absolutely love it. And I sort of think it was good for me to read A Condition Called Love, knowing that series is ending, or I mean, it's ended in Japan, but it's going to be ending here in the US as well. And being able to come to this series and see that, or have that nostalgia for her art, because I'm like, Sensei, I'm like, I can see that as you when he smiles. I'm like, I know that's Sensei and her art. And it was very cool to see that, because I'm not really one, I mean, sometimes like Io Sakisaka, like I can recognize her work. Okay, this one doesn't have one of the big smiles, so let me go on this one. I can't always recognize like Lovesick Ellie and Love That's an Understatement. I never knew those were the same creator. I had no idea. So sometimes I just cannot recognize another artist's work, but when we see his smile, yes. I was like, this is Sensei's art. She has such a beautiful, compelling way of writing her stories and doing the art that really engages me as a reader. And so I loved being able to sort of like scratch that itch of being back with a series by her. And I never really expected me to feel that way. But I mean, I knew I get Condition Called Love, that the characters felt very realistic in that series as well. And even if I didn't always agree with certain decisions that were being made, they still felt so real to me and not just a character in manga. So I appreciated how this story was able to convey, because we find out as the story goes on that Shoujo doesn't have a multiple personality disorder. She doesn't have that she has actual spirits who are possessing her body, which sounds really creepy when I feel like it's just said just like that. But when you get to meet these spirits and you get to see how they have helped Shoujo to become this incredible young woman by the end of the manga, it was so moving and very beautiful, and really just never expected to get invested so much emotionally into these characters. And I think, again, like I said, it was because they felt so real. Like Sensei, at this point, anything she writes, I will pick up and I will read. She will become an auto-buy author should she write another series, which hopefully she will. I don't know if there's any other series that are out that you can read. I honestly have no idea. I didn't think to look into that, probably because last night I stayed up late to finish the final volume and I was a hot mess, cried a whole bunch. But let's talk about Tetsu, because this truly is his story, which I guess would make sense because he's the main character. But I don't know, there was something so wonderful about him. I genuinely feel he is a knight in shining armor. I know he would not feel that way. There are several times in this manga where he really knocks himself and says that he's an awful person and he wishes he could treat Shoujo better. He wishes he could be better. He wishes he could do this, this, and this. But I'm like, bud, do you know how hard it is to be in a position like you are, where you are afraid of supernatural things, and you know that Shoujo is not the real Shoujo that you're talking to at multiple points in this story, and for you to still choose to reach and stretch out your hand and say, I will help you to find out who you really are as Shoujo, not as any of the other spirits, but you yourself, that is humongous. And then when he makes mistakes, when he knows he is lying, that he shouldn't be doing the things he's doing, he says, I am sorry. I am sorry. And I just couldn't get over that. Not only maybe because I feel like in culture today that it's like men don't apologize. I know that's not true for every guy. I totally understand that. But I feel overall there's still this idea a man doesn't need to apologize. And so like when I see that, I'm like, man, that's really amazing. But also to be a younger man who hasn't even graduated from high school and just to display this maturity, to display this character growth, even when it came to being afraid of how he's like, I don't want to be afraid because I don't hate you and I want to be your friend. I mean, I really feel that is at the core, at his heart, and it continues through the whole series, no matter how many times he may berate himself, and he really does put so much on his shoulders. And I think it's either in this volume or the next volume where we start seeing the why. Why is Tetsu so obsessed with making money? Why is he almost taking this bribe, this blackmail to help Shoujo for the sake of money? Even though we can see that's not what he wants to do, but he decides to do. And y'all, my heart broke for him, but there was such healing. And I just was so, again, touched at the character growth that we see in his life specifically. That yes, he may be a knight in shining armor. He may not think that, but again, I do. He is still a human being who makes mistakes, but can admit that he made those mistakes. He is one of the most compelling male leads I have read about. And that's why I feel like he is going in the Best Boy Hall of Fame in my mind, because there was something so powerful about his life story, about his story in this series that I never expected, especially too when it's in this. I know why I cried in this volume too, because up to this point, like, we see that Tetsu is just trying to help Shoujo. It almost feels like Shizu's story, that Tetsu's just here to help aid her, to help her really live her life without the help of the spirits and become braver, to experience new things that she has never experienced in her life. But yet, when she sees that Tetsu is struggling, that she knows he is not happy, she goes out of her way. She becomes more courageous to to help him. It was like two different storylines. I combined it in this one volume where we see Tetsu's pain. We see Shizu growing in her bravery to help him, and them just collide in this emotional, impactful, awesome way that I was so touched by that. Again, that's where I started crying, and I never expected that. I'm like, nobody warned me about crying so early on in the series, but Tetsu, again, is just one of the most compelling male leads. I know I said that twice, but I can't get over his story and just thinking of how he was in the beginning, that he was a scared young man who wasn't making necessarily the best decisions, and even if he thought he was making the best decisions with the best intentions, that it backfires later, but he's willing to say, okay, I could have done this differently, I could have done this differently, but I promised that my heart was trying to do the best thing that it knew how to at the end. But the thing is, people came alongside me and they said, hey, you are not alone. You don't need to have this burden on you, thinking you have to do all of these things. Like, yes, the way his family came and played such a major role, and I absolutely adored how much he loved his sisters. That was absolutely wonderful about his character. Really loved to see where he just like everything, family comes first, and that came with some hardships, and my heart hurt for him. But man, shout out to, who I probably won't go too much in depth about, but to his best friend who thought he was just a minion. You silly young man. When he was like, am I the stupid one here? I'm like, I would say that, bud, but you were being a little bit silly. You were being a little bit silly. You guys are best friends. And so how he was able to come on screen, and we're able to see how he was able to help him, how they come together. Absolutely wonderful. So glad again that he had, that Tetsu specifically had people in his life to help him in such a powerful and incredible way. And so everything about Tetsu, I loved him. He's a flawed young man, yes, but man, when he rises up, and again, he's not afraid to make those apologies and do everything he can. Even if he's like, I'm not sure if there was like a better decision I could have made, but his heart was in the right place. He's doing everything he can to help support his family and also help Shizu, which, let's talk about her. I realized too at the very beginning, I really struggled to have a connection with her. I feel like some of that's probably intentional, because if she is having spirits that are using her body and they are being their real selves, or at least as real as they could be in somebody else's body, then we're not going to know who the real Shizu is. And it was really incredible as well to see how she was at the very beginning to who she is at the very end. Y'all, when there was an analogy, an example given in the very final volume about a cup and it overflowing, whew, it hit me really hard. As soon as I started seeing that cup overflowing, you knew. I mean, like, it's like the thing that you have been waiting for Shizu's life. We're seeing her experience things. We're seeing again her be brave as she was in volume 3, her standing up for herself, her learning, what do I like? What do I dislike? What are things I want to do? And what are things that are who, and what are things that I care about? I was very amazed though when we meet her parents, because her father, I do not have a positive favor reaction to at all, and was very like red alert. The sirens are blaring when he comes on page. But even with her mom, and that was, oh my gosh, as a mom myself, I could not fully relate to her decisions that she made, but seeing the transformation that happens there was absolutely incredible. And I was like, man, I'm so proud of you, mama. I'm so proud of you. But with Shizu, I was so proud of her as well, because it is a really hard thing when you feel your parents, who should ultimately always be there for you, are not there for you, to the point where you're like, I can't even view you as a parent because you just weren't there. But her say, I'm still open, or at least maybe not outright, but through her actions say, I will hear what you have to say and be open-minded with you and be open to having a relationship with you, is an incredibly powerful thing. As someone who has really struggled with my parents, I just couldn't get over, like, I don't know if she knows how miraculous and how much of a miracle that is. Because even though I get that she, maybe in my case, I had a lot of anger, almost to the point of hatred, due to certain things that my stepfather had done to my family, that I never imagined ever having any kind of sinless relationship with him at all. And I just couldn't imagine being in Shizu's shoes and just being open to getting to know her mom again. I never would have expected that for her story specifically. Honestly, we don't know where it goes, but I felt like it ended on a hopeful note where we can see healing in that relationship. It will probably never be what it could have been, but it will still be some kind of relationship that I think will be, I don't know if special is the right word, and I don't want to say important, but I do think it will do something positive in Shizu's life. Now with her dad, I don't know. We ain't even talk about him. I generally don't know about him. But with her mom, I think it would be. And so I was continuously amazed of getting to know Shizu. And I mentioned, I think in 2 of my reviews, that it was very fascinating reading about her character because she has like this childlike wonder. I mean, going to school and hearing the squeak sound of your shoes or the chalk, like things that I feel like even Tetsu says that we would take for granted and that they're everyday occurrences for most people, at least for most students. But she had not experienced that. So it was like we were really able to experience the everyday occurrences through her in a way that it feels brand new. And it's like, wow, this child has seen it for the very first time, even though she's a teenager. I thought that was very compelling, and I really enjoyed seeing how Sensei was able to convey that feeling or that sensation when reading, because it was not something I personally was prepared for, and just felt like there was the series is already special, but I felt specifically about that with her character that it added another layer to this story that I genuinely, again, I just never imagined. So I loved both of these little precious beings. They were absolutely amazing and so strong and so brave, and the decisions that they made was amazing to see how they were taking these small little steps to grow as an individual and to grow closer and to be honest and open and to communicate what they're feeling and not just keep it inside. It was beautiful, and that really carried over into the romance. I don't feel like, yes, we know that Tetsu really does love Shizu, and I loved how frank he was with his feelings. I know there were times that he struggled, but he was very open, and I appreciate how like he had to be, because Shizu didn't know what love was. She hadn't felt these feelings before, and so for him to say, hey, you know, I love you differently than I love other people, and her realize, like, one of the spirits encourages her, like, what Shizu would you put for this word? Like, to describe the feelings in your heart, you have to do that. And when she does, I'm like, oh my goodness, it was so powerful. I saw somebody mention that the ending is very open-ended, and I think it is, but I would not change how it was. I think it was the perfect way to end this story when it was so emotional, especially in this volume, that it gave me hope for these characters and what's to come. Because there was one element, which I can't say, that I really, from how it was in volume 1, and it's sort of looming and hanging over everything, I was really scared, would it be addressed in this final volume, and would it be addressed in a like non-happy way? And I can't say more, but I was very thankful how since they did it. I do feel like this volume is bittersweet, but not so where I felt like I left the series feeling depressed. I felt hopeful, I felt encouraged, and I felt like I could be a braver person as well. And one thing that's very fascinating me with the spirits is they're all using Shizu's body. I think there's like 4 of them that we mainly meet. Each person, like this is Shizu, but she looks different. This right there in the blue, that is Shizu. This is Shizu. But these are all different spirits in Shizu's body, and it was very interesting seeing how we knew when somebody had overtaken her body, and that was a different person that technically wasn't Shizu speaking. It was very fascinating, especially of how the art was drawn, because each person looks so different. And I felt like there was never an issue of which person are we talking to in Shizu's body. And I never expected to get so attached to all of them minus 1, but I felt like so many feels, because that was the one spirit character I didn't like. And then to find out the twist, and I said, oh, that like twisted in my heart, man. It was, oh, that was so painful. But I really like just how the art style was drawn for each character. And I will say, out of all of them, Haru, I loved his character so much, and I was emotionally devastated with things with him when we found that backstory. The tear works began and they would not stop. I really, and everything too with Tetsu was so powerful and moving. There were awkward things that happened that had some really great humor and comedy, but they had such a special relationship, and it really hurt to know certain things that had happened to him and with him. Like, I felt so unprepared for that. Like, I felt like mentally you sort of have an idea of where the series is going to go, but it was like not enough. it was not enough to prepare me. And just, again, his backstory just, oh, it crushed me so hard. And seeing and getting to just really know him. I would also say, I think his name was Kanito. It was so interesting of how attached I became to him, considering how we had met him and when he came along in the, I was about to say who it was, but Shinobu. I loved his character as well, and how he really became a father to Shizu, and that she really probably would not even be functioning if it had not been for him being there with her, telling her what to do. And I love just even when she was young and we're seeing like a flashback and she's saying, you know, well, you could do whatever you need with my body to help me basically stay alive. And he tells her, no, you need to do these things that help you to function each day. I'm paraphrasing. And it was, I thought, very powerful because he's still helping her, but he's still saying you have this choice to live your life. Even if we're in your body, you are ultimately still the one making this choice, that has to make this choice to continue to get up, eat the food you need, get dressed, and take care of your body. I thought that very powerful with his character, and honestly just everything. Truly, this series was nothing like I expected it to be. I came in so leery, and honestly, when I made my graphic announcing what my schedule was this month, or this week, excuse me, I was really nervous to say that I was giving this series. I think I said Wake Up Sleeping Beauty was worthy of a second chance. And I hadn't even read at that time, friends, I'll be honest. And I actually prayed a lot about it because I was so scared of like, there's no going back. I had read Villains Are Destined to Die Volume 3, and I took longer to read it than I expected. And so I'm like, this is it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to trust and I'm going to believe that everybody who said, hey, you need to come back to the series, that it truly is worth the second chance. Yes, it was. I might have been unsure at the beginning, but by the end, I was so emotionally invested, hooked, devastated, all of the feels. It was truly a wonderful series that is so much more than the label of a supernatural romance, which is what originally turned me away. I'm, again, just so thankful. If you are a fan, or if you don't mind supernatural romance, I should say, or supernatural themes, and want a sweet romance, but really want a story of growth, of healing, of forgiveness, and that childlike wonder, and really being able to live your life, not in a selfish way, but in a way where you're saying, hey, today I'm going to live my life. I'm going to make my own decisions, and I'm going to be present. This is so much a series I would suggest, that I would recommend. It was beautiful and heartfelt, and I really enjoyed both of these characters so much. It was everything. I'm unsure if I would rebuy this series for my personal collection, but I can definitely say that this is a series that I will look back on and be fond of, and just so thankful I took a chance on this again, that I read it in its entirety, not just one volume, because the art was so beautiful and the characters were so powerful and engaging and gripping, and I really enjoyed myself. I might have cried a whole bunch. Not all sad tears, but I felt very encouraged as a human being, and that life is not always easy, but it is definitely worth living, and that there are people around you who genuinely care for you and want to support you. They may not always understand what's happening, but they see you and say, I will be there right by your side. It is beautiful. It is powerful. And again, I would highly recommend it, but I would love to know, have you read this series? Are there other supernatural romance series that you really enjoy, or just other series that you feel are emotional and worth reading? I would love to know. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!